That's right. You too can have 1,500 horsepower in a street car with air conditioning. What had leaked this time was the O-rings for the compressor. Now what I was going to show you is I have an O-ring kit that you can buy from like O'Reilly's, AutoZone, what have you. And looks like this. This is just a universal kit, comes with a bunch of O-rings, and you just find the two that match. You put them on the compressor, you tighten it up, and it's just that easy. My O-rings looked okay, but they looked like they were compressed a little bit. And when I first turned on my pump, I could hear it actually squeaking, making a squeaking sound with the air that was coming by it. So I pulled it apart, found two O-rings that matched, popped it on there. As you can tell, it fixed it. It's pulling a good vacuum now and it's holding steady. To show you that, I can turn this off, and you can see here on the gauge, it's not moving at all. It's staying solid at 30 inches of vacuum. But to do it the right way, if you have trouble like on this car, so this is a vacuum pump that I have, and this is the actual gauges, the nice gauges that you want. And as you can see, it's pulling about 30 inches of vacuum there on the gauge. And what you do is you hook up to the low pressure side, which is the blue line, and the high pressure side, which is right here, the red line. When you pull the vacuum, you open up both sides, the high and the low side, you pull a vacuum on it. I like to pull a vacuum, like I said before, at least 45 minutes to an hour if I ever broke the system loose, which I had in this case. Then you close all the valves up, turn your vacuum pump off. I let mine sit overnight, about 24 hours, and it did not drop a bit. It was still holding 30 inches of vacuum. So at that point, you close your high side, you close your low side. You want to make sure they stay closed. You're not going to touch the high side anymore. You hook up your freon can. You purge it through the middle of the manifold gauge. You just purge the air out of it. And then you turn it on. You get the car running at normal temperature, turn it to max AC, roll your windows down, turn the fan on. That just helps it to continue running as hard as possible. Plus you can reach in and check your temperature easier. Once that's up to operating temperature, then you start feeding in the freon. If it doesn't turn your compressor on with the first can, just bypass your jumper there like I was showing you with a little paper clip. To run on its own, and that'll help you at least get the first can or two in there. Once you start putting the can in, go slow. You don't have to cram it in there. If you go too fast, sometimes you could actually cause a problem and lock up your compressor. So just feed it in slow. It's not a race. Just put the freon in slow, let your valve open slow for first 30 seconds, have it just cracked open a little bit, and then start opening up slowly after that. It takes a couple minutes for the cans to go empty. And I recommend shaking them while you're doing it, between 10 and 2 position type of thing. And then at the end, turn upside down, finish getting all your freon out, and just wear some gloves, because sometimes you will have a little bit when you're screwing the adapters on. It will leak just a second as you're screwing it on. It's not a big deal. Just go ahead and screw it on and you're fine. One thing about these adapters, just don't over tighten it. A trick is, put the adapter on the can first and then start screwing this piece on. Before you screw that on, have your line hooked up. So when it does start to leak, you can actually just tighten these up real fast, and then you won't have any more problems. say that's working pretty good. Down to 36 degrees coming out the vent. You see our high side pressure here, our low side pressure there. Alright, so to cap off this video, on my car, and maybe this will apply to your car as well, the 1 can of freon wasn't enough to trip the switch on, the high pressure switch for the air conditioning. And what it did, it kept cycling. So you'd hear the compressor cut on, cut on, cut on, cut off, cut on, cut off. And the problem is when it's off, it's not sucking in any freon. You need to have it on all the time. So what you need to do is just pull your connection off of that switch, which you saw me do, and make a jumper. I just use a paper clip and go between the 2 pins. You'll see there's just 2 pins, 2 wires. Make connection across it. You'll hear the compressor click on, and it may take it a second, and it'll stay on. And then once the compressor's running by itself like that, then you can start feeding in your freon. Once you get the first can of freon in and start on your second can, you can actually go over and switch it out. I always put the 2 cans in. Once I got the 2 cans in, when I got ready to do my 3rd can, I went in and took my jumper out, plugged in my connection, so it was running on the compressor now with 2 cans of freon. It was running on the compressor, had plenty of pressure. And then I put my 3rd can in. And you actually load them in real slow. You don't just crank the valve wide open. Feed in kind of slow for the first 30 seconds. Shake the can between 10 and 12 o'clock is where they tell you, just to keep it kind of upright so you don't have it upside down. That's where more liquid goes into the system. You do that at the very end. So you want to get most of the gas going into the system. So you hold it kind of upright or sideways, shake it between 10 and 12. When the can gets about empty, then you can turn it upside down and shake out any residual freon that's in there, and that where maybe some of the liquid. You'll see it in your sight glass, and that'll empty the can all the way out. Before you disconnect your can, just turn your low side valve off on your manifold gauges, and then just simply unscrew the can and put on your new can. For this particular car, I wanted to show you, I looked up online, for all 97 to 04 Mustangs, they say you need the PAG 46 oil, and you need 8.5 ounces if you've got a brand new system. And then for 134, you need 34 ounces of freon. So just wanted to show you, I got the system up and running. It did take 3 cans of freon to get it in a, what I call a general area for the pressures and all that it's looking for. Certain cars require more pressure, but again, you want to kind of go by this chart as a rule of thumb. When if it was 90 degrees outside, we'd be looking more for 45 to 55 pounds on the low side. Because we're 70 degrees right now, we have to drop that down by about 10 pounds. So we're around 35 to 40 is what this is calling for. And in reality, you know, our high side is just a little high. So I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm gonna drive it around, see how it feels. I'm sure at 30 some degrees in the car, it's gonna feel great compared to having no air conditioning. But the system is charged now, it's ready to go. Hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more about putting freon in the car, that you have to pull a vacuum. So I hope this was helpful. My TTSaleen is back with air conditioning. If you heard it, it does sound a little different. It's because I have the X pipe on it. I don't have the mufflers on it yet, but just with the X pipe on it, it moves the sound further back and actually collects a little more, so it sounds more deep, big block type of sound. So hope you enjoy a little more in depth of how to add freon to your car instead of my Explorer video, where you're literally just taking one of these gauges here and you're just forcing it into the car with a can of freon and this little trigger. You know, while that does work, that's one of those very quick, add a little bit of freon and get out of there type of thing. But if there's a restriction or a blockage, you really need to get these type of gauges so you can check your high and your low pressure side and make sure you don't have something else going on, like a blockage or something that would be causing your issue. You also want to pull a vacuum and have these type of gauges to make sure you don't have any leaks, which is why you may be losing freon in the first place. Have any questions, hit me up. May not be the way that you do it, but it's the way I do it, and it works. The results are there. If I drive it around and I feel like it's not cooling as much, or I need to add something to it, I might add a little bit of freon or maybe a little bit of oil with freon in it. Just so you know, when you add the oil, it actually has some freon in there. So we'll see. But right now it is charged, it works, I'm happy. Have a good one.